and I'll keep it hush.
If you're wondering how Hillary Clinton chose a guy named Tim Kaine to be her running mate when most of America had never heard his name, you aren't alone. Luckily, Politico did a report on how Clinton vetted him, along with all the others she considered as possible running mates. According to Politico's seemingly in-depth report, Clinton spent several weeks interviewing all her potential running mates, asking them tons of questions, flying them around for meetings, having them over for lunch with the Clinton family, and generally grilling them in every which way under the sun. They had to answer 150 questions on a questionnaire. They had to list all the property they'd ever owned. They had to provide copies of every resume they handed out to anyone in the past decade. They had to list every business partner and every gift they'd ever accepted in a professional capacity. Politico breaks down the entire vetting process in a way that makes it seem like Clinton chose Kaine in nothing but a really smart, thorough way. That Clinton demanded Kaine, along with anyone else who might become her running mate, turn over every single solitary password for every single solitary social media account for every single one of their family members. Not just their usernames, their passwords. As in, Clinton made sure she and her camp could literally access all their Facebook, Twitter, etc. accounts to make sure they could control every single word any of them had ever written. Why the hell would Clinton need Kaine's wife and kids' passwords to their social media accounts? Forget about Big Brother. In Clinton's world, it's all about Big Mother.
Well, I mean, I went to a Hillary Clinton event in California and a Bernie Sanders, and there were Trump protesters on the outside, and all of them did was shake people's hands and ask them questions why they liked Hillary. So Michael Zimmerman is on the anti-Trump side right now, blending in. This is Joe Biggs with Infowars.com. I'm on the Trump side right now. I was able to get in behind a camera crew, even though I have press credentials. And now that side over there has become very violent from time to time, and now they're allowing us to finally get out of here. Oh, looks like there's a big scuffle going on again. If you notice on this side, very peaceful.
Pretty chill.
No one's pushing over here, no one's being violent.
It's okay, they're a good guy.
Have a good one. Thanks, brother. Have a good one, man. Hey, man, you guys be safe. Have a good one. Thanks.
Push the protesters to that side of the street away from y'all so they can get to their buses quietly and not cause any problems.
Why do they have buses?
And then, yeah, they got bussed in.
They got bussed in, huh?
Yeah.
Wow, that's gold for me right there. Thank you. It was it George Soros? Wow, so
Didn't have to go to work.
that's pretty crazy, huh?
That's right.
Anti-Trump supporters bust in.
And then once they're all out of the way and secured on the buses and out of the picture, we'll open this up. Y'all can mosey to your cars. Thank you. All right, follow over here on the street, off the street in this secure location. Once everyone's pushed in this sidewalk area, we're going to open up the sidewalk on that side to let the protesters get out of the area here and towards where they got dropped off and picked up. So that way there's no problems. There's a peaceable resolution. Once they're out of the way here, we're going to open this up and y'all can start.
What about the protest?
Wish to seek justice, those who wish to be heard and want answers, and the difference between those protests and the thugs who only want to incite violence and destroy our city. I'm a lifelong resident of Baltimore. And too many people have spent generations building up this city for it to be destroyed by thugs who, in a very senseless way, are trying to tear down what so many have fought for, tearing down businesses, tearing down, destroying property, things that we know will impact our community for years.
Breaking news from Baltimore, a city on edge since the death of a suspect while in police custody. Tonight, those tensions fueling violent protests now. Dramatic images coming in at this hour. You can see some people on the streets there throwing rocks and bricks at police officers. Tonight, we know more than a half dozen officers injured. You can see the officer's head there on the right being helped. This car set on fire, groups climbing on top of other cars, smashing windows tonight. Law enforcement across much of the city in riot gear this evening, and all of it after that police suspect, Freddie Gray, died later while in police custody.
Most of the protesters were young people, some wearing masks, all refusing to back off.
We have 7 officers who were injured during the course of this. They have broken bones. One of them is unresponsive. This is not okay.
The rocks still flying late in the day, and as you can see, the calls for peace are not holding here in Baltimore.
Huge police
Well,
presence.
right now we can tell you that fire crews have been able to get here. What we found interesting is that there was a group of citizens that got between the demonstrators, or the combatants, I guess you would call it, and the police, trying to assist the police so that the fire crews could get in there. There's a woman that's been attacked by the demonstrators. There's been people that have been trying to help her to protect her, but as they move her, the individuals are attacking her. This was set on fire by the people that are demonstrating. Stand there trying to block traffic. The problem is, as the officers block the traffic, the protesters move to where those officers are, and those officers are not protected.
Nope.
Then they end up getting pelted with rocks, bricks, concrete blocks, and so they end up abandoning their post.
Susie and Elsa, 15 police officers were hurt today, 6 seriously, and more than 24 arrested after a series of violent clashes. The governor of Maryland has activated the National Guard, and the mayor of Baltimore has imposed a nighttime curfew all week long. Tonight, the city of Baltimore is still burning after riots erupted on the streets today as protesters attacked police and looted local businesses. The family of Freddie Gray is condemning the violence.
I've been here earlier today, and we had a beautiful homegoing service. And to see that it turned into all this violence and destruction, I am really appalled.
I mean, at one point, rather, fire crews were dealing with 4 separate fires within the same vicinity. It was this 3-alarm fire over here, a fire at this abandoned warehouse, a couple of homes nearby, and then also a car fire. And when I spoke to the deputy fire marshal here who was on the scene, he says that he believes it is likely that this is all a part of the riots that are sweeping across the city.
We ain't going to motherfucking place. This is our motherfucking city. Fuck all you pigs.
Over the past few months, we've seen protesters, in some cases, becoming violent towards police. These images now are familiar to our viewers. There was the sucker punch also in New York. And a week and a half ago, some of the protesters demonstrating in Manhattan were chanting, "What do we want? Dead cops. When do we want it? Now."
It's a pleasure and honor to be in this dialogue with you. But I think that a huge part of what you haven't said is you've offered a recognition that mass incarceration has not worked. But the truth is that there's an extremely long history of unfortunate government practices that don't work that particularly affect black people. And I genuinely want to know, you and your family have been, in no uncertain way, partially responsible. Now that you understand the consequences, what in your heart has changed that's going to change the direction of this country? And how can those mistakes that you made be lessons for all of America?
I can only tell you that I feel very committed to and responsible for doing whatever I can. But you're going to have to come together as a movement and say, here's what we want done about it.
I stand here in your space, and I say this as respectfully as I can, but if you don't tell black people what we need to do, then we won't tell you all what you need to do.
Respectfully, if that is your position, then I will talk only to white people about how we are going to deal with the very real problems.
That's not what I mean.
I don't believe you change hearts. I believe you change laws, you change allocation of resources, you change the way systems operate.
Any minority that has a block of votes that stick together is in a strategic position. Either way you go, that's who gets it. You're in a position to determine who'll go to the White House and who'll stay in the doghouse. You're the one who put the present Democratic administration in Washington, D.C. The whites were evenly divided. It was the fact that you threw 80% of your votes behind the Democrats that put the Democrats in the White House. When you see this, you can see that the Negro vote is the key factor. And despite the fact that you are in a position to be the determining factor, what do you get out of it? The Democrats have been in Washington, D.C. only because of the Negro vote. And all other legislation they wanted to bring up, they brought it up and gotten it out of the way, and now they bring up you. You put them first and they put you last. Because you're a chump. A political chump. Anytime you throw your weight behind a political party, then that party can't keep the promise that it made to you during election time, and you're dumb enough to walk around continuing to identify yourself with that party, you're not only a chump, but you're a traitor to your race.
UN invites Black Lives Matter to event. UN rights expert cites structural and institutional racism in the U.S. That's CNS News. The UN runs Black Lives Matter through the Open Border Foundation, Open Society Foundation that Soros puts billions into. Billions with a B. So, of course, they're part of the UN. It's the Strong Cities Initiative.
Governor Brewer writing a stern letter to Secretary of State Clinton over a human rights report prepared by the State Department for the United Nations. Now, in that report, the State Department presents examples of how American law can be an example to the world and outlines ways the federal government is protecting human rights using the Department of Justice's lawsuit against SB 1070 as an example of the government protecting human rights. As you know, some of the countries in the UN Human Rights Council are Cuba and Libya. Arizona's Governor Jan Brewer joins us. Good evening, Governor. And this letter that I have a copy of that you wrote Secretary of State Hillary Clinton dated August 27.
Well, it's absolutely nationalism gone amok. We are really offended, Greta, that the Obama administration, the Secretary Clinton would take a duly enacted law, Senate Bill 1070, and present it to the Human Rights Council at the United Nations. We believe, I believe strongly, they owe us an apology and certainly want them to remove it from their report. You know, if the federal government would do their job, secure our borders, we talk about human rights. We have, you know, thousands of illegal aliens coming across our border and suffering under inhumane conditions due to the drug cartels and due to the heat and, you know, dying out in the middle of the desert.
Do you expect that Secretary of State Clinton will be responding to your letter?
Well, you know, I certainly would think that she would be. You know, I've had a real difficult time with the Obama administration, but this is becoming over the top. I would have expected, at least again from them, that they would have notified us before we found out on the internet that they were doing this. It is just, it's been unbelievable how the federal government has treated the people of Arizona. Are trying to take care of our people here and get our borders secured and address the issue of the drug cartels that are coming across our border lickety-split. And this is what we get in return, you know. We heard that the government was going to sue us when she was down in Ecuador. Now we find out that they're going to turn us over to the Human Rights Council on Senate Bill 1070 and let countries like Libya and Cuba decide if we're doing right or wrong.
What do you mean by one of the last paragraphs? It sounds like you're threatening the federal government. It says, if you choose not to, which means if you choose not to remove SB 1070 from this report as an example of human rights violations, that the state of Arizona will monitor the proceedings and assert any rights it has in the process. And it says, be assured that the state of Arizona will fight any attempt by the United States Department of State and the United Nations to interfere with the duly enacted laws of the state of Arizona in accordance with the United States Constitution. Those sound like fighting words. What are you telling her?
Well, I'm talking to my counsel. We're not going to sit here and take it from the federal government. We are going to do whatever it is necessary to keep our sovereignty. How do you explain to these people that are doing these things that they're overstepping, they're overreaching? It's outrageous, it's very offensive, and it's wrong. Arizona has the right to enact laws that we see fit. We have sovereignty in the state of Arizona, and to refer us to a council of their making at the United Nations, to have those people determine and lay us out, to have Libya and Cuba determine what we are doing is wrong. So we will take whatever measures that we can do illegally and otherwise. You know, I'm going to fight back.
Good to see you all, Heather, Abby. You know, the DNC had been promising for this whole week that their convention would be smoother and more orderly than the GOP convention last week. But the release of these 20,000 DNC emails hacked by Guccifer 2.0 and posted on the WikiLeaks website on Friday is doing some serious damage to that promise. Already, the chairwoman of the DNC, Debbie Wasserman Schultz, has been yanked from her speaking slot. That is a very, very big embarrassment for them. Then I quote, leaked emails of DNC show plans to destroy Bernie Sanders, mock his heritage, and much more. Online from WikiLeaks, really vicious, rigged.
Hello. Hello. She has the courage to lead the fight for common sense gun legislation. Hillary is one who can ensure our movement will succeed.
Presidential hopeful Hillary Clinton is waging an all-out war on guns and gun owners. She has called the NRA her #1 enemy, compared the organization to communists and Iranians, and promises to make gun control a central part of her bid for the White House, including using Australian-style gun control as the model to adopt here in the U.S.
Offered a good price for buying hundreds of thousands of guns, that by offering to buy back those guns, they were able to, curtail the supply and to set a different standard for gun purchases in the future.
I was a bit horrified by that. I don't think Australia is a model for the United States on gun control at all.
Senator David Leyonhjelm, the strongest voice for gun owners in Australia's parliament, Australia's mandatory confiscation has not kept guns out of the hands of criminals, and it won't work in America either.
It made no difference to firearms violence, to gun violence, violence overall. In fact, we had a blip up in general violence after the gun bans. So removed the right to own a gun in any state in Australia for self-defence. We're a nation of victims. You cannot own a gun for self-defence. Doesn't matter what the circumstances, doesn't matter how big the threat, you cannot defend yourself. The criminals still have plenty of guns. There's no shortage of guns. There's a very vigorous black market for guns. So it's really not made the slightest bit of difference. Look at what Australia did. It's a defenceless country these days. I'm absolutely in awe of the success of the NRA at holding back the tide, and it never gives an inch. We love the NRA here in Australia amongst us gunners, and in fact we rely on you guys to also help us hold the line in Australia. It's not something that any country should contemplate, is completely disarming their population.
Gun owners in Australia told me back that the unforgettable images of their guns confiscated by the government should be a wake-up call to all of us to never surrender our rights, because once they're gone, you'll never get them back.
In 2005, an arrangement between Canada, Mexico, and the United States was made. This arrangement, unannounced to the public, unregulated by Congress, merges the United States, Mexico, and Canada into one entity, erasing all borders. It's called the North American Union. In fact, there is only one mainstream reporter who has actually heard of and has had the courage to cover this issue.
The Bush administration's open borders policy and its decision to ignore the enforcement of this country's immigration laws is part of a broader agenda. President Bush signed a formal agreement that will end the United States as we know it, and he took the step without approval from either the U.S. Congress or the people of the United States.
This isn't some trade agreement. It is a total removal of sovereignty from these countries, which will also result in a completely new currency called the Amero.
Fall. Apart from that, I think one thing people who are dollar-based need to focus on is the Amero. That's the one thing that nobody's talking about that I think is going to have a big impact on everybody's life in Canada, the U.S., and Mexico. To make a borderless community and the dollar, Canadian dollar, U.S. dollar, and the Mexican peso replaced by the Amero.
By default of this agreement, the American Constitution will eventually be obsolete. The North American Union is the same concept as the European Union, the African Union, and the soon-to-be Asian Union, and the same people are behind all of them. And, when the time is right, the North American Union, the European Union, the African Union, and the Asian Union will be merged together, forming the final stages of a plan these men have been working on for over 60 years.
The United States is engaging in the Trans-Pacific Partnership trade negotiations. We're pursuing a regional agreement with the nations of the Trans-Pacific Partnership.
We are also pressing ahead with negotiations for the Trans-Pacific Partnership.
Trans-Pacific Partnership, a new free trade agreement.
We are very committed to the Trans-Pacific Partnership.
The Trans-Pacific Partnership.
The Trans-Pacific Partnership.
Trans-Pacific Partnership. Trans-Pacific Partnership. The Trans-Pacific Partnership. The Trans-Pacific Partnership. We should aim for true regional integration. And that is the spirit behind the Trans-Pacific Partnership.
The Trans-Pacific Partnership.
High-quality Trans-Pacific Partnership. We're excited about the innovative trade agreement called the Trans-Pacific Partnership.
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 Trans-Pacific Partnership. A far-reaching new trade agreement called the Trans-Pacific Partnership.
From new trade agreements like the Trans-Pacific Partnership.
We also discussed the Trans-Pacific Partnership.
We've used trade negotiations over the Trans-Pacific Partnership.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. The first priority of humankind in this difficult era is to establish an effective system of world law that will assure peace with justice among the peoples of all the world. Second, I feel rather sentimental about this award and this organization because I'm in a position to speak my mind, and by God, I'm going to do it. You know, those of us who are living today can truly influence the future of civilization. We can influence whether our planet is going to live or die, whether it's going to drift into chaos and violence, or whether through a monumental educational and political effort, we will achieve a world of peace under a system of law where individual violators of that law are brought to justice. We Americans are going to have to yield up some of our sovereignty. That's going to be, to many, a bitter pill. A lot of persuasion to them to come along with us on this necessity. It's important we should sign and ratify the Treaty for a Permanent International Criminal Court, with revision of the veto in the Security Council and adoption of a weighted voting system in the General Assembly. George Soros, in his recent book, The Crisis of Global Capitalism, has given serious attention to this concept, which would be based upon not only the one nation, one vote, but also on population and contributions to the UN budget. This would then be binding, enforceable law. Why the Senate is not ratifying these important treaties, and why the Congress is not even paying our UN dues. Even as with the American rejection, our failure to live up to our obligations to the United Nations is led by a handful of willful senators who choose to pursue their narrow, selfish political objectives at the cost of our nation's conscience. They pander to and are supported by the Christian Coalition and the rest of the religious right wing, that we should have a world government, but only when the Messiah arrives. Attempt to achieve world order before that time must be the work of the devil. Well, join me. I'm glad to sit here at the right hand of Satan.
We would like to bring you a message from the First Lady of the United States, Hillary Rodham Clinton.
Good evening and congratulations, Walter, on receiving the World Federalist Association's Global Governance Award. For more than a generation in America, it wasn't the news until Walter Cronkite told us it was the news. For decades, you told us the way it is. But tonight, we honor you for fighting for the way it could be. We honor you for lending your voice to the cause of human rights around the world and for your lifelong commitment to international human rights law. You have stirred our consciences and challenged all of us to live closer to the words of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. So thank you, Walter. Thank you for inspiring all of us to build a more peaceful and just world. We are still listening to your every word. And with your continuing leadership, we can sail across these unnavigated seas into the 21st century.
General Dempsey, you in one of your criteria for determining what we might do militarily, you say you have to ask the question whether the action is worth the cost and is consistent with law. What law does the United States military look to?
So cost, resources, risk incurred elsewhere by the use of force one other place. So the issue of legal basis is important, though. You know, we act with the authorized use of military force either at the consent of a government or out of national self-defense, and it's a very, there's a very clear criteria for that. And then the last one is with some kind of international legal basis, an UNSCR.
Wait a minute. Let's talk about an international legal basis. You answer under the Constitution to the United States government, do you not? And you don't need any international support before you would carry out a military operation authorized by the commander-in-chief.
No, of course not. That's the second one I mentioned.
I just want to know that because there's a lot of references in here to international matters before we make a decision. And I want to be sure that the United States military understands that we're not dependent on a NATO resolution or UN resolution to execute policies consistent with the national security of the United States. Now, Secretary Panetta, you, in your talk, in your remarks, first, we're working to increase diplomatic isolation and encouraging other countries to join the European Union and Arab League in imposing sanctions. And then you note that China and Russia have repeatedly blocked the UN Security Council from taking action. Are you saying, and is the President taking the position, he would not act if it was in our interest to do so if the UN Security Council did not agree?
When it comes to the kind of military action where we want to build a coalition and work with our international partners, then obviously we would like to have some kind of legal basis on which to do it, as we did in Libya.
Now, some sort of legal basis. We worried about international legal basis, but nobody worried about the fundamental constitutional legal basis that this Congress has over war. We were not asked, stunningly, in direct violation of the War Powers Act, whether or not you believe it's constitution. It certainly didn't comply with it. We spent our time worrying about the UN, the Arab League, NATO, and too little time, in my opinion, worrying about the elected representatives of the United States. As you go forward, will you consult with the United States Congress, and can we be assured that you will have more consultation and more participation and legal authority from the duly elected representatives?
We want to consult with the Congress. We want to get your best advice and your guidance. And when we take action, we want to do it together.
And do you think that you can act without Congress to initiate a no-fly zone in Syria without congressional approval?
You know, again, our goal would be to seek international permission and we would come to the Congress and inform you and determine how best to approach this, whether or not we would want to get permission from the Congress. I think those are issues we would have to discuss as we decide what to do here.
Well, I'm almost breathless about that, because what I heard you say is we're going to seek international approval, and then we'll come and tell the Congress what we might do, and we might seek congressional approval.
No, well,
I want to just say to you, that's a big dish. Wouldn't you agree? You've served in the Congress.
Yeah.
Wouldn't you agree that that's would be pretty breathtaking to the average American? So would you like to clarify that? But you, before we do this, you would seek permission of the international authorities.
If we're working with an international coalition and we're working with NATO, we would want to be able to get appropriate permissions in order to be able to do that. That's something that, you know, all of these countries would want to have some kind of legal basis on which to act.
What legal basis are you looking for? What entity?
Some kind of UN security resolution.
So, who are you asking for the legal basis from?
If it's obviously, if the UN passed a security resolution as it did in Libya, we would do that.
But I'm really baffled by the idea that somehow an international assembly provides a legal basis for the United States military to be deployed in combat. I don't believe it's close to being correct. They can provide no legal authority. The only legal authority that's required to deploy the United States military is the Congress and the President and the law and the Constitution. Well, I'm troubled by that. I think that it does weaken the ability of the United States to lead. If we believe something ought to be done, I'd be thinking we would be going more aggressively to NATO and other allies, seeking every ally that we can get. But I do think ultimately you need a legal authority from the United States of America, not from any other extraterritorial group that might assemble.
From 1945 and the end of the war through 1989 and the end of the Cold War, we had a worldview. Republican and Democratic presidents alike, from Harry Truman to George Bush. stood for freedom and stood for certain propositions that would make America strong and healthy and grow the middle class and shrink poverty. And after 1989, President Bush said, and it's a phrase that I often use myself, that we needed a new world order. And
I will fight for comprehensive immigration reform and a path to citizenship for you and for your families across our country. I will fight to stop partisan attacks on the executive actions that would put dreamers, including those with us today, at risk of deportation. And if Congress continues to refuse to act, as president, I would do everything possible under the law to go even further.